Hi everyone, this is Sira and you're watching Tech for Luddites. The world is in chaos. The economy is in flames and banks are printing money round the clock to keep companies and countries afloat. Things are so bad that even ultra-capitalist America is considering previously unthinkable measures, like handing everyone a check for $1,000. In the midst of all the fear and despair, I wanted to focus on the tangibles. A video where we discuss promising treatments that may return us to some kind of normalcy. And to understand how these treatments may work, we first need to know the mechanism of viruses. Sneaky little germs that straddle the line between life and non-life. Our cells are lined with a number of receptors that serve various functions. And some viruses, like the SARS-CoV-2, happen to have just the key with which they can bind to these receptors and enter the cell through a process called endocytosis. They then use your cellular machinery to quietly manufacture parts of themselves before reassembling and taking parts of the cell wall to go infect more cells. Antivirals are hard to make. There are only a handful of them approved for therapy. This is because viruses essentially hijack the host cell's processes in order to make copies of themselves, which necessarily means that anything that impedes the virus is likely to harm the host cell as well. RNA viruses like SARS-CoV-2 also mutate at an incredible rate with every replication. Because unlike DNA viruses, they don't have an error-correcting mechanism. That means that even if you have the drugs to stop some replication, the virus will quickly develop mutants that are immune. So for any antiviral to be effective, it needs to be extremely potent, reducing replication to near zero. Because of these reasons, you don't have a broad-spectrum antiviral like you have antibiotics. Despite all of that, mankind has come up with a library of compounds that are effective in different situations. So which of them could work against the SARS-CoV-2 virus? Tamiflu, the well-known flu drug, works by disrupting the last stage of viral reproduction, which is where the viruses use the cell wall to create a membrane and escape to infect other cells. In effect, it disables the axe they use to cleave themselves free, so they just stay stuck there. This is called a neuraminidase inhibitor. It was widely used as a prophylactic in the original SARS outbreak. Prophylactic, meaning something you can take as a precautionary measure if you suspect you have been exposed to infection, even before you start showing the symptoms. But in that case, we already knew how it worked against SARS, as it had been widely tested by the Americans. We don't yet know how it will interact with SARS-CoV-2. And in any case, due to the fear of the virus developing resistance, it is no longer recommended as prophylaxis. Another neuraminidase inhibitor, however, has been found to be resistant to resistance. Next, remdesivir. It's a drug by a company called Gilead and was tested by the Chinese in their fight against COVID-19. It has been used for Ebola before, and this works at the stage when the messenger RNA is creating protein chains in the ribosomes. It slips into the middle somewhere because it's similar to the RNA nucleotide, and no further links in the chain can be added. It's analogous or similar to a virus's nucleotide, and hence is called a nucleotide analog. A couple in Jaipur with COVID-19 were successfully treated with HIV drugs. This is usually a combination of 3 drugs which inhibit different pathways. The virus would be able to mutate and evolve past one bottleneck, but 3 different mechanisms are enough to pull down its replication numbers below the threshold. Here's a not-so-fun fact though. When healthcare professionals are working with HIV-positive patients and happen to prick their fingers or otherwise be exposed to blood, they have to take this drug as a prophylactic. Apparently, the side effects are so bad that they've been known to say that they would have preferred to get HIV. Scary stuff. The last drug we're going to discuss has been a source of a lot of hope recently, with a number of successful uses and the US government declaring that they're approving it for use immediately. When viruses hijack the cell's machinery to manufacture their own parts, the process is only triggered at an acidic pH. Chloroquine works by increasing the pH of endosomes and thus stopping the assembly line in its tracks. The best thing about this medicine is that it has long been used as a prophylactic and treatment for malaria, so it's generally known to be safe. Though how exactly it interacts with SARS-CoV-2 will need to be studied. That's all about antivirals. Let's talk about vaccines next. The whole thing with vaccines started when Edward Jenner noticed that milkmaids never seem to get smallpox, only a milder disease called cowpox. Why Jenner knew so much about milkmaids is anyone's guess, but he did what anyone would. He took the pustules from the hand of a milkmaid infected with cowpox and injected it into his gardener's son, presumably without either of their permissions. The boy developed fever but quickly recovered. And later, when Jenner exposed him to smallpox, presumably again without his permission, he proved to be immune. This became the very first vaccine, and since then, we've developed new and ingenious methods to inoculate against infections using antigens and deactivated viruses. Vaccinations basically trick our immune systems into making antibodies without actually getting the infection, like training in certain formations in preparation for a big match. There are 3 major vaccines that are being tested for SARS-CoV-2. Moderna uses mRNA from SARS-CoV-2. Regeneron uses the protein spikes that line the virus. And Inovio uses the virus's genetic sequence similar to Moderna. Moderna is, however, the only company to have begun human trials, starting with 45 test subjects. They also are somewhat unique in that while most flu vaccines are produced in chicken eggs. Yeah. Moderna's method has your own body produce the vaccine once you're injected with mRNA. That speeds up the manufacturing process and also avoids the whole issue of having to order 7 billion eggs from your local farmer. But because vaccines are something that must be given to a huge number of people, their effects need to be really closely monitored. That's why it'll probably be at least a year before something is approved. Because of this and the relatively untested nature of the antiviral drugs, our best bet right now is to find ways to reduce the transmission of the virus through the population. So how does the virus spread in the first place? There are 3 main ways. Airborne droplets, which means someone coughing or sneezing in your vicinity. This can be mitigated by wearing a mask, using your elbow to cough, and maintaining a distance of at least 6 feet or 2 meters from other people. Or you could avoid people altogether. The best thing to do with your mask is probably to donate it to a health worker, because there is a shortage. But if you're coughing and sneezing and have to go out, please put it on. Fecal-oral transmission. This happens because when you flush a toilet, fecal matter is aerosolized and the virus gets into the air. So public toilets like those of airports, offices, and even airplanes may be a big source of spread. So get into the habit of putting the lid down when you flush. The third is direct contact, meaning handshakes, hugs, etc. The virus can also survive on various surfaces for different lengths of time. The graphic should be on your screen. Wouldn't it be great if we could electroplate everything with copper? You should look at avoiding touching things in public areas and also cleaning commonly used surfaces with disinfectants. This definitely includes your phone. How long the viruses survive on surfaces is also a function of temperature and humidity. All 4 human coronaviruses display seasonality, which means they have peaks in winter and troughs in summer. According to preliminary studies, this seems to be the case for SARS-CoV-2 as well. This might explain why warmer countries are seeing lower numbers, though this is more likely attributed to the fact that these countries tend to be poorer, with less testing. The months to come should provide clarity on this matter. However, the words of the poet Suryakant Tripathi Nirala should strike a word of caution for those of us who think that summer is going to cure this disease. Speaking about the Spanish flu of 1918, he says, "I traveled to the riverbank in Dalmau and waited. The Ganga was swollen with dead bodies. At my in-laws' house, I learned that my wife had passed away. My family disappeared in the blink of an eye. All our sharecroppers and laborers died. The 4 who worked for my cousin as well as the 2 who worked for me. My cousin's eldest son was 15 years old, my young daughter a year old. In whichever direction I turned, I saw darkness." Remember the receptor the virus attached to in the animation? Well, it's called an ACE2 receptor. People suffering from diabetes and heart diseases are often given drugs called ACE2 inhibitors, which seems to lead to increased ACE2 receptors on the cells. This may be why people with these conditions are succumbing to COVID-19 at a higher rate. But this is still early information, and the current guidance is not to stop any medication while treating the disease, as it may make things worse. But this may still be a problem. Diabetes is very prevalent in India. The same goes for heart diseases. But overall, our population is quite young. So hopefully this means that things won't get quite as bad as Italy. A lot of people are also saying that having a large Chinese immigrant population may have been the match that lit the tinderbox there. But a quick search on the internet shows that Australia, Canada, and even Russia have larger Chinese immigrant populations. All countries that have not experienced anything as severe as Italy, in the absence of further information. If you see this being shared on Twitter and Facebook, you should point out the facts. Let's quickly talk about soap. It is not being recommended for general cleanliness. For viruses, soap is a chemically active substance that acts pretty much like acid. There is a fantastic video from Vox explaining this, but because not everyone clicks on links, here's how it works. The hydrophobic part of the soap molecule sticks to the layer of fat around the virus and shreds it to pieces. I repeat, in this case, soap is not about hygiene or general cleanliness. It will literally disintegrate the virus, as long as you wash your hands for 20 seconds or more. If you're in a profession where you face more exposure to the virus and you have older parents or grandparents at home, here's what you could do. When you get home, go straight to the bathrooms, soak your clothes in detergent and water, and take a bath with hot water and soap. And only then interact with the people in the house. This virus is proving so contagious because unlike SARS and MERS, you could show absolutely no symptoms and still end up shedding viruses everywhere. In other diseases, by the time you were contagious, you'd probably be unable to get out of bed and thus keep yourself from infecting others. That's why the closing of schools is a big deal, because children can act as asymptomatic carriers. For the same reason, it may be a good idea to keep them from playing in large groups. On Thursday night, Prime Minister Modi declared a self-enforced quarantine for Sunday. I know, introverts are like, apna time aa gaya. This is a good start. But the protocol for someone to get tested in our country is still to have a travel history and symptoms. I think this may not be enough. South Korea, for example, tested widely and rapidly. And that, along with contact tracing, seems to be what allowed them to beat the virus much quicker than almost any other country. Other factors come into it, of course, like an excellent healthcare system, but widespread testing was definitely a significant factor in their success. It's not yet known exactly what will happen once the world tries to go back to normal. Will the virus begin spreading again? Or will herd immunity kick in? Over 80% of the people infected are likely to suffer only a mild illness, and all those infected should gain some degree of immunity. But it is not known for how long or to what degree. If there is no significant herd immunity, then we need to brace for another wave of infections later in the year. This is not altogether unlikely. Take the influenza vaccine, for example. It needs to be reformulated every year to deal with new strains and mutations. At that stage, serological tests which detect antibodies may be able to help us know which people have immunity and thus can go back to work. With the current state of affairs, though, that seems highly unlikely. Okay, some final points. Since we know this virus jumped from an animal host to humans, it is possible that it jumps into another animal reservoir. And when it jumps back to humans, it is more virulent than ever. Initial reports seem to suggest that only older people were at risk. And while in terms of mortality that's true, it seems that everyone who gets this disease can get acute lung damage. And young people are dying too. Don't take any chances. So far, most of the deaths have occurred from viral infection and lung damage, from the resulting cytokine storm, which is your immune system going into overdrive and attacking healthy cells. Secondary bacterial infections don't seem to be as common at this point, so you might not need to rush after antibiotics. If you want to improve your immunity, having excess vitamin C won't work. And if you're deficient in vitamin D, your immunity won't get boosted overnight by standing in the sun. Just take supplements instead. I know this is not your regular flu, but things that will help there will help here too. Like gargling, steaming, drinking kashayams filled with antimicrobial goodies. So keep at it. And people in some parts of the world, you know who you are. Stop hoarding toilet paper. Why don't you instead call your plumber and look into having a health faucet installed? Or even a bidet. It's basically an unlimited, cheaper and a hygienic version of toilet paper. If you want information on this particular subject, watch the video in the description. And if you're one of those who are affected by the current financial state of the country, maybe you'll find my friend Rachna's videos useful too. There are so many unknowns at this stage that it's difficult to be certain about anything. Either way, it looks like a huge chunk of the population will get the infection. We just have to make sure it is over the course of a year as opposed to over a month. Flatten the curve, like they say. But make no mistake, this is humanity's greatest scientific and social challenge in the modern age. If only we'd listened to Bill Gates. Good old Bill. Hopefully this period sees us finally winning the battle against these tiny molecular machines, and world leaders take serious measures to streamline our processes in confronting these world-changing events. Otherwise, the world may be a darker, bleaker, more lonely place for a long time to come. I hope you found this video useful. Like, share and subscribe to get more videos like this in your recommendations. I'll see you really soon. I hope. Bye.